To get started, the purpose of this PowerPoint is to discuss the facts associated with the case of Coke and Pepsi in India, water issues, and crisis management. Coke and Pepsi are two of the largest multinational beverage companies in India, which is interesting to note because in developing countries, oftentimes things like soft drinks are seen as a luxury. Natural resources have the ability to become scarce by producing products similar to cola, which will be discussed later on. Going off this, the problems begin when the operations of cola plants raise issues revolving around the sustainability and ethics, meaning that for the last couple decades, it has been widely known in India that the public and private operations of both cola companies have brought about long-term problems and controversy, which in turn has resulted in a continuous battle with some of the largest public interest groups and political figures that India has. Now that some general information has been given, in order to understand why water is so important to the people in India, we need to take a deeper dive. As previously stated, water has the potential to become scarce, particularly when companies such as Coke and Pepsi begin operations and the plants they run oversee resources intended for the surrounding communities. As recognized by the United Nations, water in India holds a lot of sacred meaning in the culture, as well as the practices and traditions that are associated with it. The cleanliness of the water does not depreciate the spiritual value that is associated with it, and many of the practices and traditions revolve around bathing in the water and the scattering of ashes when someone has passed. Next, while both companies have been selling and producing colas in India for quite some time, the allegations didn't start until 2003, when the two largest public interest groups made allegations against Coke and Pepsi that revolved around water and how it was being used by the plants, as well as pesticides found within the colas produced by both companies. The allegation was made as a direct result of the public interest groups running tests and forming studies against the companies. Both groups also made it a point to reach out to the surrounding communities in order to gain insight on how the plants were affecting them. Ultimately, though, after the first set of allegations made against both Coke and Pepsi, both companies denied the allegations. Moving on, there are a few key organizations and people that played a role in the problems that Coke and Pepsi have in India. The first of which is the Center for Science and Environment in India, otherwise known as the CSE. The CSE was the first public interest group to make allegations against both of the cola companies, stating that the soft drinks contained an unhealthy level of pesticide residue that was not limited to one, but instead applied to all products being sold and distributed throughout India coming from the companies. The CSE also made it known how dangerous consuming high levels of pesticide residue was after receiving the results of the tests. The next group that made a lot of allegations against both cola companies was the India Resource Center, otherwise known as the IRC. While they also made a lot of allegations revolving around pesticides within the cola product, they were also equally adamant about the misuse, control, and over-exploitation of the water within the communities of India, especially those within close proximity to a Coke or Pepsi plant. In order to make their allegations known, the IRC provided information that showed the severe water shortages and droughts from the communities within close proximity. The IRC provided information that showed the severe water shortages and droughts for the communities within close proximity, as well as the overall change in the water in these communities, with the taste and smell changing, and how the pollution of the water was affecting the farmers and the soil in the communities. One of the most notable allegations made against Coke and Pepsi by the IRC was stating that both companies were destroying lives, livelihoods, and communities after denying the allegations made against them the first time around. Santina Narain is one of the most recognized people from both public interest groups, sitting as the director of the CSE. She was important to the allegations because of her dedication to lessening the exploitation of water in India. She made a name for herself and gave people a name to associate with the public interest groups. She was also responsible for bringing the main focus and attention of the media to the allegations. However, as will be discussed later, her main focus was to motivate both of the cola companies into taking a step back and reevaluating their operations, as opposed to banning the products and shutting down the plants. Not too long after the initial allegations in 2003, with the help of the CSE and the IRC, as well as protesters, there was a partial ban placed on the products from both cola companies in 7 out of the 28 states in India, as well as 1 out of the 28 states completely banning the cola products. While these bans stuck for a while, not too long after, they were reversed due to the tests being dubbed as inconclusive and therefore thrown out. With tests being conducted by both the CSE and the IRC, Pepsi and Coke finally took it upon themselves to conduct tests of their own on their cola products. They concluded that the products they tested align with the standards of the European Union. However, they also made it a point to mention that other soft drinks, water, and food options produced through the food supply in India also contain traceable levels of pesticides. They claimed that these levels are sometimes higher than the products produced by Coke and Pepsi. However, the impact from the cola companies is more significant because they are both multinational companies as opposed to companies owned in India, and therefore they are not held to the same standards. As the allegations continue to be made against both companies, they needed to find a more aggressive way of dismissing the allegations made against them. As the allegations continued to be made against both companies, they needed to find a more aggressive way of dismissing the allegations made against them. Coke, for example, found that if they focused on creating and promoting their advertisements for the company, they would be able to show people in India that the allegations made weren't true. Coke even went as far as to enlist people to talk about their understanding of the allegations. Coke put their advertisements everywhere, from newspaper ads and being mentioned in letters from companies owned in India, all the way to advertising on television. One of the main celebrities in India that they had in their commercials was Amir Khan. Within the commercial, they showed a tour of the plant and were able to connect and allow people into their plants in order for them to see what goes on behind the scenes and advertise themselves in a way that showed they had nothing to hide from the people. Pepsi, like Coke, also struggled in the beginning to divert the allegations made against the company in regards to the water pollution, pesticides, and overall effects that the plants were having on the communities in India. However, they chose to connect with the media in India and focus on regaining trust and ensuring that the relationships could be made between the people in India and Pepsi, specifically reaching out to editorial boards and through conferences and showcasing a tour of their plants on TV for people to see. Apart from this, Pepsi also made an effort to take an internal approach to combating the water usage of the company by engaging with employees in the plants, focusing on ways they could cut down on unnecessary waste and find new ways to improve the plants. Moving forward, both companies made it a point to use to their advantage recognizable people that citizens in India and consumers of both products could trust. And while both Coke and Pepsi continue to take proactive steps towards finding different ways of decreasing water usage and rerouting waste, it is especially important for them to find better ways to support the health of the water in the communities, especially those with close proximity to the plants. In doing so, they created the Indian Beverage Association in 2010, which was a great way for both companies to come together and address the concerns on a united front. Since then, both companies have continued to focus on water security and sustainability where water is involved.